And we're live! One more time.
Social distancing.
Yes. We are the Trauma Guys. I'm Lee.
I'm Fayaz, and I'm supposed to look like this. But I'm not. I'm not going to do this. I can't do this. I have to do this all day. It's like I'm wearing panties on my face all day. I have to wear a mask everywhere I go. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, I feel you.
And I'm not doing it. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. It's horrible, man.
Yeah, it is kind of annoying. That's why I didn't want to become a doctor. Plus, I didn't like school that much, so...
Well, I mean, at least you get to take theirs off, right? You're right. There's that, too.
Yeah. So, we're doing the dark side of the ring, the Von Erichs.
That's right. Again.
And, I've always been a Von Erich fan, even though I did not grow up in Texas. I knew who they were. I grew up in Kansas. But the Von Erichs were associated with the NWA, and from time to time, they would show some stuff that they were involved in. Even though they were WCCW, they were still part of the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, which the belt traveled around and whatnot. So I did know who the Von Erich brothers were. So, and they were like rock stars around here to this day. You mentioned the Von Erichs name, and people that aren't even wrestling fans go, "Oh, I know about the Von Erichs." And they're held in the utmost esteem, even though they had a big, kind of a family tragedy. So, we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's their story, man, and everything that they did and everything that they came from. And then where it ends up, it's man, it was hard to watch, man.
Yeah,
that was kind of tough. Like you know, we all knew what happened and you know how it went down and everything like that. But to really watch him talk about it like that, and then you know have to break down a few times and have to step away from the camera, and you know him realizing that, man, maybe I didn't realize that, I maybe hadn't really gotten over this. It was like I thought I did, There was one point, and it was, man, it was tough, man, because you got to think, and you grow up with that many brothers, and then you're the only one. You're the last one left, right? And you grew up with that huge family, right? You're always together, you're always running around. You do everything together, and now you're just you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have your own family, but as far as your siblings go.
Well, it kind of started. His father Fritz was a wrestler, and he was known as a vicious. I mean, he was known as Mr. Hardcore. Like not like in hardcore what we think, but he was stiff, strong, hurt people. Was a kind of a brutal type of wrestler, and he played a Nazi just because he was the bad guy, and he thought, "What's the worst thing I could possibly be?" A Nazi, and it wasn't because that's how he felt, but that was the character that he portrayed.
Right.
And during those times, it was probably, people probably did want to see him get killed or do some other stuff back then.
Oh, absolutely.
And then he started to have a family, and they lost their very first child at 6. His name was Jack. Jack was electrocuted on their mobile home up in the front. And he fell into the snow and basically drowned face down in the snow.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So Jack was actually the oldest before Kevin. So Kevin eventually became the older brother. I mean, just because Jack had passed away. So if that's something you didn't know, that's something new that I learned that I didn't know either, that there was one before. And
yeah, I didn't know that either.
So
I had no idea.
Yeah, so then his dad started. He retired from wrestling, started being the promoter, because that's usually what happened. Is you were big in some area, you started doing good, and then you became a promoter in an area and took over a promotion for a certain area of the country when there were still territories.
Yeah,
and
I mean that their show was probably one of the biggest, right? They drew big crowds.
Yeah. The Sportatorium.
They drew huge crowds, and everybody in Texas knew them. They were just household. They couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. Everything they did, I mean, it was man, it's just crazy, man. That was just wild.
Yeah. So and then David he was the guy that they were grooming, because I don't think Kevin really in himself, he enjoyed doing what he did with the fans, but he didn't want to be champion because he didn't want to take that extra on. He enjoyed what he did, but he didn't really want to be that. So he was grooming David to be champion. And
Right.
and and so David was being the guy. They were pushing him all. They were big. They were like rock stars around here. I mean, literally, girls would come run out, ripping their clothes off. I mean, all that stuff. It was, it was ridiculous. They were like the heartthrobs of the area, and they were wrestlers, and it built up, and then David went to Japan to compete, and they called one of the guys and said, "Hey, Dave Von Erich, dead, hotel," because the guy didn't speak much English.
Right.
That's basically what he said.
English.
And they said, we didn't have cell phones back then, so you just couldn't call. So he hopped in the car and he drove to wherever and said, he said when Fritz opened the door, he said, "Which one?" Like he knew something happened to one of his boys, and he said David was dead. And he said he kind of took it hard, but he's kind of a tough old man who didn't really show a lot of his emotions a lot of times. And so Brody was the one who found him, Bruiser Brody. Went to go take care of him. Now, they said that he had been sick before he went to Japan. So a lot of people had always speculated, it must be a drug. He said he already had stomach problems and he was throwing up and he was extremely sick. But his dad was such a hard guy, and they always wanted to do what Dad said. Dad said, if you make a book a show, you do it. It doesn't matter. So he flew to Japan,
right.
And that flight in the plane, it swelled up his gut. It got up into his, the blood. It got into, and he had a heart attack. And it just happens. He was sick, and back then a lot. And even guys, just in general, as guys, as we know, we've been sick and done stupid stuff we shouldn't have and gotten sicker because we always...
What, his intestines ruptured?
Yeah.
Is that what... Oh, like shock.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
So that's the reason why he died. And they said it was a huge... There was, 6,000 to 8,000 people came to the funeral. There was a big...
Yeah.
A lot of the big famous wrestlers came out. It was a big deal, and there were fans outside the place because they couldn't fit them all in. They put speakers outside so they could hear it. They were crying and everything. So that they made an impact in their area where they were at.
Absolutely.
Because
even he said that when he was telling the story. He was like, "Man, that's kind of when I realized how much of an impact we made.
Yeah.
like how big we were. That sort of thing."
So
yeah.
So then they tried to. Somebody along the line tried to throw in a fake Von Erich, and they said somebody named Vance, who they were like, he didn't even fit, Vance or Lance, some dude who didn't even who didn't even fit with them. And I honestly I don't remember that guy. And what they talked about was it was just kind of flop in the pan, and both Kerry and Kevin were not into it. They're like, we don't lie to our fans, just
right.
So
took them out, and then they were like, "Okay, well, you're right." And then Cornette was saying, "Well, they forced it on the fans, and they got the fans to kind of accept it, and then they ousted him."
Yeah.
Right, and they're like, "Well, so what are we doing?"
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
and then they got Mike. Mike decided they're going to push Mike to wrestle, and they said, Mike was willing. He worked hard, and he wanted to be something, but he just wasn't as athletic or able to do the stuff that his brothers had the ability to do.
So he wasn't as big. He tried to be big, but he wasn't as big. He wasn't explosive, that sort of. But I mean, he tried to do what he could do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, he looked a little more than when they brought Chris in, and Chris was a smaller one. But he tried, and they were talking about, they did commercials. They were doing a lot of stuff, getting popular. They did stuff for Pizza Inn, because Pizza Inn used to be big throughout Texas. It was a big deal. And then Mike hurt his shoulder in Tel Aviv. In Israel, which wrestling Gino Hernandez. So they said that he knew it was hurt, and so they had emergency surgery. But Then he flew home just a few days later instead of, he should have stayed for much longer. So
Yeah.
he came back and he got, he had a fever, he got septic, which means, your blood, it's just a bad infection from staph.
He got staph, yep.
So he got septic, so they brought him to the hospital. They thought he was dying. And they talked.
Yeah, they pretty much came out and told him, you guys need to come in and say goodbye. We don't think he's going to make it through the night.
Yeah. So, and this is where something comes in. And some people, you can say what you want, whatever, but their faith was strong enough during that time where there was a wrestler who was a preacher who came in, and they were all saying prayers and whatever, and he said, within a short amount, he slammed the Bible down and said, "In Jesus' name, with the promise," and then all of a sudden, not too long later, they came in the room and said his fever went down. He's doing much better. We don't know what happened, and they honestly didn't. Right. And some people may not believe in God, and I'm not pushing that on anybody. But if your faith is strong enough in something, this is something that was weird because they literally said he was going to die.
Yeah.
And after these people pulled together and he was still there. Now, they think that maybe it left a little brain damage from the high temperature he had and some of the other stuff because he got angry after that. He'd attack phone poles and parked cars.
He'd parked cars. Yeah. I mean, there didn't even have to be anybody in the cars, is what he was saying.
Yeah.
He goes, he would just do a lot of crazy stuff. Yeah.
And then he said, he started getting into drugs because it kind of helped him cope with whatever was going on afterwards. And a lot of times, and just being people that we are, who we are as people, a lot of times when we see people that are in drugs, we always assume that, but sometimes people get into them because it's their escape from whatever's bothering them at that moment. And instead of trying to find out what that is, we always give another excuse or just say, "Oh man, you can get past this."
So I'd rather go into another realm of reality.
Yeah.
Versus face the reality that is.
Yeah.
And it's
so he got.
It was probably a little tough, man. And if there was brain damage there, right, and he was doing those things. I mean, it was only right, and then you start doing drugs. Well, it's not a good combination altogether, right?
No. Not at all.
All that's going to start to diminish, even at a quicker pace than it regularly would.
Yeah. Oh, and then they said he had got arrested for all this, and he had been he just got out of jail, and he was like really disappointed in himself, and then they found him dead in his vehicle on the property, on their parents' property, and that seemed to be a theme after that.
It did. God, man, that dude, it's crazy. I can't even believe it.
So then they tried to get little brother Chris involved, and Chris had asthma, and because way back then when you had asthma, now asthma's taken in a different way now, but back then some of the medications for asthma gave you brittle bone disease.
Right. I mean, it caused, but at the end of the day, I think what they said was he was small. He wasn't really that athletic, and they tried to make him more technical, I guess. Remember, he was saying he was trying to make him more technical, and he said it just wasn't working out. Like, he was just beating himself up.
Yeah. Then he broke his arm, and he was a little disappointed. He disappointed me and this and that. And Kevin said he had borrowed his VCR, and he said all of a sudden, I know where Chris is calling him. He said, "I want my VCR back. I want it back now." And he's like, "Man, I'll give it to you in the morning. Not a problem, Chris, but I'm not going to do it right now because it's like midnight or 2 in the morning." And he said, and then he saw him driving around in his 3-wheeler around his house, and so he followed him down, and he's like, "What'd you see my note?" He said, "What are you going to do this?" He said, "Don't do this, Chris. Promise me you're not going to. We'll get together. We'll talk through this. We'll talk to you tomorrow about it."
And he tells him, "Yeah, man, I'm not going to do it.
Like,
don't do anything stupid." He was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do anything stupid." Is the way, he was just kind of like, that's the way he said it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then he goes home, he sees his dad, and he asks his dad about suicide notes, and his dad's like, "Where is he?" like basically stands up and says, what's he doing right now? Where is he? And he says, well, he's here and here. And he goes, you need to go back right now. He goes, you need to go back. He goes, apparently my dad hadn't told me that this had maybe had been something, I guess, that maybe had happened a couple of times, and they just kept it, between him and his dad. They didn't really say anything. So that's what I was hearing anyway. And he went back up there, and he said, man, I must have just gotten there. I just missed it because, I found him dead. And I was like, God, that to me is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And here's why that's crazy, because you could, so you got the one that I didn't even know about, right?
Jack.
He dies he died, right? So Jack dies a certain when he's a kid. Obviously that wasn't on purpose, right? We get older, right? One of them just passes away, right?
Mm-hmm.
He passes away, the gastro deal, right? Intestines ruptured, whatever it was. Big, strong guy takes it as, man, my stomach hurts. The show must go on, right? Yeah. Right? Then you lose two brothers, right? To
suicide. Drug overdose and
it's just that's just a tough word for me to say. Drug, suicide. It's you almost wonder, and nowadays, they might, nowadays, back then they probably didn't really think about it much, but nowadays, they might look into, was there any type of mental illness going on in the family that they just didn't know about? Nowadays that's something they might actually look into, right?
Yeah.
So, for the ones who committed suicide, obviously.
Yeah. So then you had Kerry and Dad's organization's going down. It's not doing well. Kerry gets a chance to go to the WWF. They take him up there, but instead of before he goes, he has a wreck with a motorcycle. He runs into a parked police car with his motorcycle and tears his leg up. Something fierce to where they amputate it. And for the longest time, see, that was a story I had heard many years back, but I never knew for sure. And then I've heard the stories and stuff, but he was
But apparently it had happened a while before.
Yeah,
he even went to the like he had been wrestling with that one foot.
Yeah,
for a long time, and nobody knew. They just kept themselves, and he did everything that he did, most of what he did in his career, with one foot.
Mm-hmm.
He did it with one foot. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is.
Even when they set him up to win the title, right? To beat Ric Flair.
No,
right?
he beat. That was way before. He beat Ric Flair before the accident.
Yeah, no. But I'm saying, right? So you have all that, right? And then you have the accident. But what they're saying about the accident is it didn't happen, I don't think, right before he went to the WWF. I think for a little while that had been that way.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in between there, that happened, and he only had one foot.
Yeah, and they kept it quiet. They kept it quiet because they were told not to say anything.
They kept that completely quiet, and what was he saying? He said, "Man, he just felt like he was never the same.
Yeah,
like I'll never be whole, right? So we can't tell anybody. You can't tell anybody."
Well, he got busted for drugs, and then he was going to get indicted on a bunch of drug charges, and he was fighting with his wife at the time, and he was like, "Would you take me back if I do this time?" And she said no, and he was just having some really hard times. So he got in his Jeep and drove out to his dad's property, hugged his dad, told him that he loved him, drove out back, and shot himself.
Drove out to the field, and and Dad realized his gun was gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he said, and Dad found him that time, and he said that he had the most peaceful look on his face, so it must have just hit him right because he shot himself in the heart. That's crazy, dude. I couldn't even imagine that. Like, here's what I don't understand. I'm trying, right? So I'm looking at all of this, And I'm looking at him telling the story. He's telling the story, and he's breaking down, and he's talking about it, and it's like he's reliving all these old emotions, right? He's almost got me crying. He's reliving all these old emotions, and then he even comes out and says, man, wow, this is really hard, man. I guess I never really stopped to really deal with this. Like he didn't realize this was still stuck way down inside of him almost. It was kind of a weird thing. But then to go further than that, man, what about his dad?
Yeah.
Right? What's his dad thinking this whole time? Man, his dad just keeps going.
Well,
with life.
Because he grew up.
Dude, how many more can you lose?
Well, during his time, he probably had breakdown moments. Him and the mom split at not too long after that because of everything going on, and he probably was angry.
Yeah,
but
I'm not saying it didn't affect him. What I'm saying is I'm trying to get into that. I'm trying to get into his head and go, what is going through your head after that happens to you 4 times? Yeah, you know what I mean? I couldn't even imagine that.
5 times.
Yeah. But
the others, but
you're right. It is 5 times. I didn't think about it. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So
wild, man.
And this story is basically an American tragedy story, and it's a Texas tragedy story because if you are from Texas and you don't know who the Von Erichs are or anything about this story, if you just delved not just into this particular one but into many stories and just to watch them do stuff together, this whole thing. Like, they were supposed to do a movie. I don't know if it ever happened, but they were supposed to do a movie about the Von Erichs and all of this. I don't know if it ever happened, if it didn't come together or what, but...
I would think that that'd be something he'd have to sign off on, and he probably doesn't want to. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't see him wanting to do something like that.
So, and right now we have 2... Kevin's got some kids and some family and some grandkids, and family is what saved him, basically. He said if it wasn't for what I have now and my family, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at. He lives in Hawaii. He lives in a peaceful place that keeps him grounded in where he is. Now his boys, Ross and Marshall, they wrestle now. They wrestle for MLW.
They do.
And we've seen them.
Yep, they do. It was pretty awesome. I like the fact that, because of everything that happened, man, he upped and he just said, I'm moving. I'm out. He left, right? He didn't raise those kids here. You know what I mean? And if you look at where he lived, when you watch this little mini doc, when you watch it and you see where he lives, right? You almost just go, man, it's almost like he kind of lives in like the type of place where they grew up on, right? A big piece of land, that sort of thing. But he wanted to be somewhere else, and he wanted to be just away from it. You know what I mean? Just completely away from it. Because I couldn't even imagine raising kids after all that just happened, right? When you guys were, so famous and everything.
Or wanted kids. That could be another thing. You just lost all your brothers.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have to be tough, man, right? But he's like, you know what, family saved me, and he's got his brothers, and that's where he raised them, and that's where they hang out, and he totally did the right thing there, man. He did the right thing there because it probably not only helped his own peace of mind to get away from it, but to keep them away from it too, so they could just be them, growing up, and not have to worry about. But not worry about that name coming behind them, right? Because they were in the state of Texas. You know what I mean? So, that really speaks to his strength as a person to be able to mentally find the right way. Because he did at one point say he almost tried to get himself thrown in prison.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that something good comes out of that story. It's still sad, but I'm glad something good comes out of that story, man. Yeah. You know what I mean?
No. So it was really good. It's heartfelt, and it is a tragedy, and but luckily Kevin was able to get past those things, and he has some wonderful kids, and I hope they do something
Yep.
big down the road. So if you like what we had to talk about, leave a comment down below. If you know more of the story, which a lot of you probably know more stuff than I do. I know people who knew him really well, who I haven't had a chance to talk to him yet about it. I wanted to do
That's
this
true.
with you first, and then we're going to sit down and talk with those people and possibly do some stuff on here as well. So if there's anything you want to talk about, leave a comment down below. Give us a thumbs up.
Let us know. Remember, we're only covering what we saw.
Yes.
That's it. We're covering what we saw, and just much respect to those, much respect to that family and everything they've been through, and where they've come from. That, I mean, just nothing but respect. And if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. It's an awesome, like what Lee was saying, great heartfelt story. It's something you want to watch, especially whether you're a wrestling fan or not. You should watch it, I think.
Yes.
Right. That's a story that you should know about, whether you're a wrestling fan or not, because that's really about people and family more so than it is about the wrestling business to me.
Yep.
So.
Well said. Until next time, guys. I'm Lee.
I'm Fayaz.
Later.